This is Newsroom on SABC News. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. My name is Eben Jansen. The show is broadcast every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Highlights are then repeated at 2 o'clock every afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We're also streaming live on YouTube between 9 and 10 a.m. every day, with the whole show available all day on our YouTube channel. Now, the Oscar Pistorius murder trial goes into a third week from today. We'll be live at the court shortly, and we'll have top detective Piet Byleveld in studio with us for his opinion on this case. Later, we'll look at South Sudan's children and the emotional trauma they have gone through during their time of war. But first, here are the news headlines. The state will call a new witness when Oscar Pistorius' murder trial resumes in the North Gauteng High Court this morning. Pistorius shot and killed Riva Steenkamp at his Pretoria home on Valentine's Day last year. He claims he mistook her for an intruder. Last week, the court heard the gruesome details of Steenkamp's fatal wounds, as well as how the crime scene was allegedly mishandled by police. Public Protector Thuli Madonsela says she will respond timeously to the announced court action by Fisheries Minister Tina Johannesburg against her. The minister says she will ask the High Court to review, correct or set aside Madonsela's report on tenders given to a fleet of vessels to guard the country's coastline. Madonsela strongly criticized the minister in a report, but Johannesburg says it contains numerous inaccuracies. The Civil Aviation Authority is investigating a light aircraft crash at Camperdown outside Pietermaritzburg in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands. 3 people were killed. Police have identified those killed in the crash. It's alleged that the flight travelling from Pretoria to Virginia Airport in Durban experienced a technical problem, causing it to apparently explode in midair. Well, now to get the very latest on the Oscar Pistorius murder trial, we go to our reporter, Griselda Lewis, who is outside the High Court. Good morning once again, Griselda.
Very good morning to you, Eben.
A new week starts and the trial seems set to continue for a couple of weeks to come. Yet just tell us, what do we expect today, Griselda?
Well, Eben, we're expecting more police officers and forensic experts to be called this week to give testimony here at the North Gauteng High Court. You would know that last week we heard of a lot of discrepancies on the part of police with regard to collecting and storing the crucial evidence in this case. We're also expecting a lot of that to come under scrutiny again today. We're expecting perhaps more of the police officers from the Boschkop police station to be called, as well as other forensic experts to testify in this matter. Well, Oscar Pistorius has already arrived. He arrived a few minutes ago. June Steenkamp, who's been absent since the first day of the trial, has now returned to court. She arrived here this morning. You'd know that she attended the trial on the very first day, but had to go back to Port Elizabeth. So she is here. We're waiting to see how she'd be able to handle the rest of the proceedings that will take place inside court. She will once again stare Oscar Pistorius in the face, again, the man who shot and killed her daughter. So we're going to monitor the situation inside Eben as June Steenkamp again makes her way inside the court today.
It's the third week, Griselda. Is the media still converging on the court? Do we still have a case where it's the trial of the century and everyone's there, or is it sort of dwindling out a bit?
Well, even there is still massive interest, in particularly from the media in South Africa. But with the international media, they're jostling a lot between the missing Malaysian aircraft and the developments that are taking place in that case, and also, the ongoing situation in Crimea. So it's dwindled a bit on the part of international journalists, but still the top story here in South Africa.
Griselda, thank you for that contribution today. I'm sure that you'll be keeping us informed as to what happens throughout the rest of the day. That's Griselda Lewis doing a bit outside the High Court. Of course, the Oscar Pistorius trial heads into a third week. Now, the name Piet Byleveld, I'm certain, sends shivers of fear down the spine of any criminal in South Africa. The former top cop needs little introduction, although he retired from the South African police at the end of June 2010 after a long and outstanding career. His opinion is still one that carries heavy weight in especially high-profile cases here in South Africa. He was also the longest-serving murder and robbery investigator in the SABC and joins us in studio today. Good morning, Mr. Byleveld. Thank you for joining us.
Nice meeting you.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Firstly,
nice to be with you.
Interesting time that you join us. I wanted to ask you your opinion on what's been going on in the court the last few days, really, about police bungling of cases. It's really your field of expertise. What's your take on this whole thing?
Well, my first priority, a policeman, if you're an investigating officer, your priority is to, firstly, at your crime scene, that's going to be 100%. You've got to be in control and see that no evidence must be destroyed or put it this way, be hampered with. You're in charge of if I'm in charge of a certain case, I can assure you nobody will interfere with my side. Definitely not.
It came out in court that the one investigator actually handled the murder weapon without any protective wear on. Would that have happened in your day?
Yes, definitely not. I can assure you, you would have been in big troubles. It wouldn't have happened because I would have been in charge of the crime scene, and nobody except forensics would have handled that murder weapon. Definitely, or the parts of the evidence on the crime scene itself.
How do you think that kind of evidence will affect the overall outcome of this case if the police is found to have completely messed up the case?
Well, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I'm sure hopefully it's not going to cause a lot of, at the end of the day, hectic of the outcome of the case, but maybe the judge will jump to certain other conclusions. I don't want to run that trial forward, but I can assure you maybe it can cause a bit of a problem.
Now you're retired, you don't have any... You won't affect the case. You can give us your opinion. What do you think are the chances of Oscar being acquitted, having seen all the evidence that you've seen over the last couple of weeks and how this thing's played out over the last year?
Quite frankly, I don't want to jump to conclusions. It's still up to the court for the judge to decide. So I don't want to commit myself on the outcome of it, but it's still up to the judge to decide about that aspect.
Your opinion on this case, and would you have liked to investigate this case, and what is it like to investigate a high-profile case of this nature? You've done quite a few.
Of course, I would love to. If I would have been an investigating officer, I would love to do it, but I can assure you I would have been in charge, proper control, and only me will be in charge, and I will deal with it in the manner I used to do with all my cases. I'm proper. Priority number one, I'm going to be in charge of the crime scene itself, and nobody will tamper with any of my exhibits on the crime scene, that I can assure you.
How do you think a case like this will affect the credibility of the South African police, and is the police on trial here as much as, say, Oscar Pistorius?
Well, it seems to me there's some certain aspects they've got to explain now, as a result that came forward now, because they have to clear that aspects up. I don't know what manner, but it seems to me they are a bit of a predicament at the moment.
When last have you seen so much interest in a murder case such as this? And why do you think South Africans are so, in a way, almost obsessed a little bit with murder cases?
I think due to the fact, innocent people being murdered. And also, I always said one murder is too much. And that's why the South African community and the public itself out there, they are so much interested in each and every case. Like, for instance, the Lee Matthews case. Yeah. I also experienced the same, basically not the same bright media, but also a lot of media involvement there. But I think South Africans also basically are sick and tired of murders being committed in South Africa.
I think a lot of people don't understand how delicate an investigation of this nature is. Just take us through the sort of modus operandi of a murder investigator in this case, and what are the things that you've got to check?
Basically, if I took over the investigation, as I said, your crime scene is priority number one. If I've been appointed to take over an investigation murder case, I'm in charge. Automatically, the whole crime scene's got to be cordoned off, and also proper notes could be taken. You get the professional people, and forensics got to be called in, pathologists going to be called in, and also each and every specialized unit that you can make use of to assist you in your investigation is of priority number one. Because at the end of the day, you work for a conviction, not for acquittal. That's for sure.
Have you ever heard of a case where an investigative officer accepted a bribe to mess up a scene on purpose?
Not that I personally experienced, not as far as I'm concerned. Definitely not in one of my cases, that I can assure you.
Why do you think South Africa is so interested in this case?
I think it's a broad media, also Oscar Pistorius himself, and also maybe the fact that he's a high-profile person, also maybe that's the reason for them. He's got a broad media, and also the fact he's worldwide. He's well known worldwide as well.
Finally, what's the sort of similarities that you see between this case and some of the high-profile cases that you've investigated in your time?
Basic similarities, each and every case, your crime scene priority number one. You can't afford to make mistakes. That's my similarities. And also to do your investigation thoroughly, and also your witnesses. You must build up a good relationship with your witnesses and consult them properly, and they must also have faith and trust in you as investigating officer, and they mustn't be scared to come forward. And priority, also huge priority, they must have faith in you also. They must have faith in the prosecution as well, to consult properly and come out with the whole version. That's very important.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Mr. Byleveld. It's very nice to hear your insights into this case.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
That is Piet Byleveld, who is really a celebrity police investigator here in South Africa. Of course, today the third week starts in the murder trial of Paralympian Oscar Pistorius in the High Court in Pretoria. On Friday, his defence lawyer, Barry Roux, questioned the competency of police who were first on the scene after the Paralympian killed his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp. Roux hammered on the fact that a police officer picked up the murder weapon with his bare hands. Former police officer Scoombie van Rensburg admitted that evidence was mishandled. He said he was dismayed to see a colleague holding the handgun found on Pistorius' bloodied bathroom floor without protective gloves. Pistorius has pleaded not guilty to premeditated murder of Steenkamp. He claims that he believed there was an intruder hiding in a locked toilet cubicle in his home when he fired 4 shots, fatally wounding her. Well, the case continues to have social media abuzz. Let's have a look at what you are thinking, what you're saying about this. Riyad Musa, the funny man, Riyad Musa, is that? Yes. Sometimes when Roux speaks, I feel like load shedding should happen in his mouth. Oscar trial. That's a funny little one, isn't it? Mabena Matwane says international media interest in Oscar Pistorius' murder trial has dropped significantly in the last 2 weeks. That's right. We are now getting into the detail of it, and I think that might be a little bit too much. Prince Flame says, if media had its way, elections would have been postponed until Oscar Pistorius' trial has ended. Well, the trial should be done before the elections, my friend. Bob Buckley says, commentators calling Pistorius handicapped, really? He was competing at Olympic athlete level. No, not handicapped. Wrong word or idea, says Bob Buckley. And then Martin Parker says, if that airplane ends up in Crimea and Oscar Pistorius is the pilot, that would tie things up pretty good. Yep, Martin, that is just about all the top stories right now around the world from you in one tweet there. Keep it coming. We love your contributions. There you go, at SABC Newsroom. That's where we live on the red line always. After a short break, we look at war in South Sudan and then the International Women's Day breakfast. Don't go away. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
Zoom into Africa. This is Madagascar. The president is Mr. Heri Rajaonarimampianina. Madagascar got independent from France on 26 June in 1960. The population is more than 21 million people. One of the major languages spoken is French. Monetary unit is Ariari.
Across the globe, the continent and the entire country, every second there's always a breaking story. SABC News is your reliable eye, ear and information system in bringing you events as they happen. Our cutting-edge and hard-hitting journalism leaves no stone unturned, giving you the whole picture every time. Join us every day on SABC2 and know what is happening around you. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back with Newsroom on SABC News. The bodies of all 3 children who went missing last Monday in Mamelodi, east of Pretoria, have been found. The boys were swept away by flood waters after playing in a stormwater pipe. Their bodies were recovered underneath trees that were uprooted after the Pinaz River broke its banks. The city of Tshwane has offered the families counselling and support with funeral arrangements. Meanwhile, the body of a 69-year-old woman swept away by floodwaters at Klein Kariba Lodge in Bella Bella was also recovered. The woman and a 74-year-old husband were swept away while swimming in an undercover pool when a nearby dam gave way after persistent rain. Meanwhile, as the bereaved families are coming to terms with their grief, life is slowly returning to normal after the 2-week deluge across northern parts of the country.
Limpopo, one of the worst hit provinces. Residents of Lephalale and surrounding areas still reeling in the aftermath. Scores of families were displaced.
The water came at night and damaged our things. Now we're looking for a place to stay for the safety of our children.
She was among one of the close to 4,500 people evacuated during the floods. 250 remain in shelters provided by the municipality.
We have got donors, we have got business people who are assisting the government in providing sanitation, water and all the necessities.
Business owners are still counting their losses. This guest house next to the Mochel River that overflowed.
We suffered about R1 million damage. Some of the affected areas are a coffee shop and some rooms. But we have worked all weekend and want to be back in business.
Countless homes and lodges along the Limpopo River remain waterlogged. Rain expected in catchment areas in Botswana and Zimbabwe. The river's levels may even rise marginally. Nozintombi Mia, SABC News.
Now, the tragedies of war have left deep emotional scars for children in South Sudan. Many have been displaced inside the country, while thousands more have fled to neighbouring countries. This latest conflict has created a scarred generation. To cope with the trauma, Plan International, a child rights organisation working in South Sudan, has created child-friendly spaces where children can play and receive psychological help from experts. Now, SABC East Africa correspondent Sarah Kimani spent a week in South Sudan and joins us on the line from Nairobi in Kenya. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning.
Sarah, interesting, you've just come back from South Sudan. Just talk us through the crisis and the situation in that country.
Well, the situation, we'd say, is getting out of hand, especially the humanitarian situation, because the action program that is saying it is running out of food for the displaced persons, and yet in some areas they have not been able to reach those who are displaced or those who are caught up in the fight, because fighting is still continuing, and so aid agencies have actually not been able to reach people who are in need of food. The other thing is that the rains have people are caught up outside in the rain without proper housing. Most of them are actually staying out in the cold together with their children.
Now, Sarah, East African leaders, they met on the crisis last week. Were there any outcomes or is there any movement over the weekend?
Yes, what the East African leaders under IGAD decided is that they're going to send troops to South Sudan, mainly to be able to monitor the peace agreement, the cessation of hostilities agreement, they will not be fighting. Instead, there will be almost like a peacekeeping force. They said the force will start moving into South Sudan mid-April. The problem is, even moving into the country mid-April, the rains will be very hard at that time, and so it is possible that their movement will really be hampered by the rains because the country has no infrastructure at all.
Now, Sarah, you've been on the ground there for the last week, and the UN has warned time and again of this looming humanitarian crisis. What was your first-hand observation, and then how many people do you see at risk?
Well, thousands of people, close to 1 million people actually at risk. In one of the camps we went to, there were over 28,000 people who were sheltered. We went to another one where 84,000 people were sheltered. Most of them have barely accommodation. Actually, most of them are staying out in the open under trees. That was during a very, very hot season, so under very, high temperatures. With sandstorms, without food, without water, without even proper sanitation. So there's a likelihood of diseases, waterborne diseases. There's a likelihood of people actually starting to die from hunger. But if it rains, then the situation will become worse.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah Kimani. That is our East African correspondent, Sarah Kimani. We apologize for the poor quality of that line. Unfortunately, that's incoming from Nairobi in Kenya. Now, the cause of women's emancipation is part of our national struggle against outdated practices and prejudices, said our former President Nelson Mandela. As part of celebrating the International Women's Day, the House of Pearls organization will be hosting an International Women's Breakfast at the Mandela Center for Memory later this month. In South Africa, the democratic dispensation undoubtedly opens new opportunities for women and ensures that they gain access to other sectors in the broader mainstream of the economy. However, this has been met with resistance, deliberate interference, and at times a lack of support. We are joined by a representative of House of Pearls, Lerato Poericozzo. Is that right?
Yes, Lerato Poericozzo.
Poericozzo.
Yes.
Well, thank you for joining us, Lerato, this morning.
Thank you, Eben.
Tell us first, let's start at the event a little bit later. Just tell us how you guys got to it and how we're going to celebrate this.
Okay. How we got to it, actually we are belated, as you would know, that the International Women's Day actually happened on the 8th of March. And initially we would have hosted our breakfast on the 10th. But realizing as well that March is the month of human rights awareness, and naturally the plight of women's rights still continues into the rest of the month, we are now hosting the event on the 26th of March at the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory. It will be a breakfast starting at 7:30 in the morning until 10:30. And the House of Pearls has gone about this initiative because the founders of the House of Pearls are highly passionate about women emancipation and women empowerment. What we believe is that economic liberation is integral to women empowerment, and we're taking a stance on that. And usually the conversations don't happen often enough, and that's why we take any opportunity that speaks to women, about women, to actually drive that discussion and that dialogue, and at the same time raising funds for the disadvantaged, particularly the rural children.
Now, there's no such thing as coincidence in life, and unfortunately or fortunately for you, the event sort of coincides with a time in South Africa's history where we really focus on gender violence. We're looking at women dying at the hands of their partners. We've got a high-profile case in the Oscar Pistorius trial. How is that going to affect the way that you treat this event this time around?
Okay. The way we're treating this event this time around, particularly, as we said, we are looking at linking the women's rights to that economic empowerment, but also looking at it and saying, but the woman, you can't just limit the woman empowerment to just the workplace. Yeah. But when you look at the socioeconomic dynamics of where women come from, where women make up 59% of HIV-infected people in South Africa. Yeah. And when you look at that stats, where is the woman getting that infection? Is there sexual violence that comes with it? Is it lack of education? Is it lack of absent parenting, the lack of the father figure as well? So when you look at it in that way, we actually want to look at the woman holistically. But particularly we want to create a woman that is empowered economically and is independent, then to actually stride forward in making South Africa a better place.
South Africa, yes. Women in Africa in general. How difficult is life for women in general still on the continent and then in South Africa?
On the continent in South Africa, I think in South Africa, our constitution really helps us quite a lot. I mean, already you've got Lulu Klungwana, the minister, trying to pass a bill where she's actually saying, let's discuss what's the possibility of having a 50% representation of women in senior positions. So fortunately enough, in South Africa, you have quite a progressive government that actually believes that women need to be empowered. Across Africa, the challenges are still going ahead. There is hope, even though it's a very small light of hope. When you look at, we do have African countries that have female presidents. So there you're seeing some hope. You do have the board of the African Bank, I'll tell you now. The board of the African Development Bank Group has approved a new gender strategy for the period 2014 to 2018, and they're focusing on three key initiatives which they believe are primary and very important at that time, and those are strengthening women's legal and property rights, promoting women's economic empowerment, enhancing knowledge management and capacity around gender equality. But those are just agendas. But when you look at it in our African countries, culturally and traditionally, you still find that the girl child is highly marginalized and the woman. So when you look at it, it's optional to send a girl child to school in Africa, unlike making it mandatory. You still have some countries where it's taboo to even have a woman driving their own cars or actually going off to work. So that plight is still quite big, and that's why we've decided to use an International Women's Day, and not just our own Women's Day in our country, and actually realize that the plight of gender equality and women empowerment is global, not just a South African issue. It's global, particularly on our continent as well.
At your event later this month, who will be some of the keynote speakers, and what do we expect them to come and contribute?
Okay. And it's interesting, the speakers that we have. Usually when you think of women empowerment and institutions such as the House of Pearls coming along, you usually think that it's radical women fighting for women. We're partnering with our fellow counterparts, the male gender, and we're realizing that we need to do it together. So as we drive women empowerment, we're not saying let's marginalize men and raise women, and that's why we've invited some of our keynote speakers. We've got Dr. John Tibane, and we've also got the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory, Mr. Sello Hatang, and what he will be doing, Mr. Sello Hatang will lay the foundation, and he will share just the transformation of what Dr. Madiba has done in terms of racial transformation, and Dr. John Tibane will actually then take that and use it as an analogy to how we can use the same transformation that our late president used to drive women empowerment.
Is that one of the key stumbling blocks in this male-female process, that what you've just mentioned, that there's a fear factor that men will become marginalized or made less or diminish in some way, that's where most of the resistance and the sort of deliberate interference we spoke about earlier hampers these processes?
You tell me, you're a man. Are you scared that when we drive women empowerment,
I think there's a large percentage of men that are very much in the 21st century and understand the context of what contribution it is. A lot of men are fathers of daughters also, and that changes the way that you see the world as well. So, yes, there's that element, but what I'm asking you, the resistance that you meet in the one-on-ones, is there a fear factor that drives it? Probably there is, and it's more social than corporately driven. When you look at where we come from, you know, how we are raised as children, you and I. You're raised to be strong, I'm the girl child, and then you get to the workplace, I'm supposed to be weak, and I come in and I'm thinking, I'm not a woman, I'm your colleague. And that then tends to rub some men down in a very negative way. Our history also contributes in a very big way, you know, that transformation still has to happen in our workplace as well, in terms of where our history has placed us now. There are a lot of factors that contribute to this. It's not an exact science or one thing or the other. But thank you for joining us, and all the best with the International Women's Day breakfast. It comes at a time when South Africa is really looking at gender issues in a different light, following this very high-profile case we're going through. Thank you, Lerato. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now let's take a quick look at what you are talking about now on social media. Of course, St. Lertse says an 80% voter turnout in Crimea and 93% of votes in favor of joining Russia. It doesn't get any more democratic than that. You try and tell that to Barack Obama, my friend. Alice Nyandu says, from missing planes to territorial annexations, the world just got a lot more interestingly dangerous. What's next? That's right, Alice. Don't be the prophet of doom, my friend. Bennett van Wyk says Ukrainians voted with 22,000 Russian guns against their heads. The result is a 97% vote in favor of a Putin dictatorship. Well, that's tough to say. You weren't there, so you can't say that was the case. Spoo says, congrats to the Crimea for making a wise decision. History will acquit you. People don't understand now, but will in future. Well, it's 9:30 a.m. on this Monday morning. Week 3 of the Oscar Pistorius trial just got underway in the North Gauteng High Court. Let's go straight into the courtroom.
Just give me 1 minute.